Welcome to season 11 of the Parenting Aces podcast, a proud member of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and this week I have a very special guest, Brett Connors, who is the son of Jimmy Connors. Yes, that Jimmy Connors. And Brett is here because he and I connected on social media with something not related to tennis at all, which you'll hear about during our conversation. But it was such a pleasure to get to chat with him and hear about his experience growing up as the child of a world champion in our sport. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. We kind of go all over the map, but it was a fun one to record. Before I bring Brett on, though, I want to just do a quick reminder that if you aren't already, we'd love to have you join Parenting Aces as a premium member. You can do that by going to parentingaces.com and click on the Join Now button in the top right. Also, if you are interested in a one-on-one consult with me, if you have questions or concerns about your child's junior tennis journey, college recruiting, I am here for that. All you have to do is go to the shop tab on parentingaces.com and you can purchase either an individual consultation or a package. Or if you want to become an annual member of Parenting Aces, that includes 2 one-hour consultations. So lots of options for you. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Brett Connors. Hey, Brett, it's so good to have you on the podcast. The whole story of how we connected, we'll get into in a minute, but welcome to Parenting Aces, and thanks for taking time to do this.
Forward to it. I know we've been talking about it for a little while and excited to do it. Talk some tennis and some other things.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned in the intro, you have a famous dad, and that's got to be a challenge growing up in a family where everybody knows who you are just by virtue of, oh, he's so-and-so's kid or whatever. You had to find your lane in life, and your lane took you in a kind of circuitous route, wound you up back in tennis, which is so cool. So I'd love for you to share kind of your story of how you kind of made your way in during childhood, dealing with having a dad that everybody knew who he was, and then how tennis kind of has played a role in your life since then.
Yeah, famous pops growing up, tennis player, but to me it was just dad always. It was always everyone else who reminded dad. But yeah, the relationship with tennis when I was a kid, I loved it. I played it a lot growing up until I was about 10, 11. I played a lot in tournaments and everything, and then a little bit into high school, and then I fell in love with golf along the way and tried to play 1 year of both tennis and golf, and that was a little much. Ended up choosing golf because first of all, I was better at it, and I also had a little bit made it more my thing instead of following in his footsteps. Because I think when I was young, I had a little bit of a problem with all of that, all of the talking and are you going to play tennis? Are you just like him? You look just like him. And as a kid, I didn't understand it. I felt like it was taking my identity away in some sort of way. Like, I want to be me. I don't want to be always this reflection or this comparison to this other person, but as a are going to do no matter what, even if your dad isn't famous, you're going to get compared to your dad because he's your dad. So but yeah, I think that made me steer away from it a little bit for some time, and when I got into my later teens and college a little bit, when I went to school, I played a year of college at Arizona, a year of golf at Arizona, and then broke my wrist, so I got a little bit away from golf, and then did some traveling, and then finished up school. And then later on, I took a job here. Didn't think it would be a long-term job. I took a PA job, production assistant with Tennis Channel. Had never worked in TV. Was a communication major in college, and knew the tennis side. Knew that I could get by with my tennis knowledge, but needed help learning the TV and the entertainment side. So was a PA for a few years, working on an instructional show called Tennis Channel Academy. That was. Then left for 3 or 4 years and went and worked with ESPN on their Grand Slam coverage and a lot of their summer series, some of their smaller events. which was really good. Learned a lot of stuff there, working with such a big company and such a big, coverage every year with the slams. And then eventually moved back to California, LA, and just started I'm not full time, but I work a lot with Tennis Channel now. I've been a tape producer, which is the person who's helps, make the highlights and works with an editor. And we're kind of like a team. We work together to produce all the video elements that you see during a broadcast, during, the post-game show or during the live coverage. And then the last year or so, I've started to do a little bit of actual line producing, where there's a light version of coverage that we do at Tennis Channel, like on the overnights where we don't have a full crew. It's just like 4 or 5 people there in the middle of tennis after dark, because that's when it gets spicy. But that's when they let me produce. So I'm kind of cutting my teeth on that, getting my reps right now, and really enjoying that part of it, and learning a lot more about it.
And you're also a photographer. I've seen your pictures on Instagram. You do amazing photography, but
Thank you.
Some tennis photography, but also nature photography, other things like that. Has that always been a passion of yours?
Yeah, I think I've always liked taking pictures. I had a Polaroid as a kid, and I have tons of old Polaroid pictures of just family and just traveling around. And then it was about 13, 14 years ago, I bought my first DSLR camera. I had a dog that had gotten sick at the time, and I was like, oh, I don't have any pictures of my dog Bentley. So I went and I got this camera and just started taking pictures and taking it with me. And I love taking pictures, and started just taking a camera on tour or wherever I was going, and just kind of fell in love with it. I'm a nerd. I have a drone. I love taking my drone wherever I go. If I take some trips, I was just down in Indian Wells doing some drone photography work with for Tennis Channel on a golf show they have coming up in a couple months. So that was cool. Got to meet Carlos Alcaraz, the young 18-year-old player, which was cool. Rude was out there, the young Rudester. Let's see, Danielle Hanchikova was there, Darren Cahill, a lot of Carreno Busta. So it was a lot of good players, and I actually got paid to just chase them around with the drone for a few days, so that wasn't too bad.
Yeah, not a shabby gig at all. So I want to get back to kind of this whole notion of establishing identity, because one of the things we talk about at Parenting Aces a lot is, your kid is more than a tennis player. They are more than how they perform on a court. They are more than their wins and losses. And finding that identity separate from the sport that they're excelling in is really important, because one day the tennis is over and you still have a life ahead of you, and you have to be a person and be a productive member of society, and hopefully find happiness and joy in whatever you're doing. And so for you, you kind of have lived that from both sides. In your childhood, your dad's career came to an end. And so you were, I'm sure, whether consciously or unconsciously, observing his transition from being a professional athlete to being a human being out in the world, and finding what else drove his passions and made him happy. And at the same time, finding your place as a golfer, and then dealing with injury and having to find your identity outside of golf. So what do you remember some of the things that kind of helped you shape who you became as you continue to grow up and move into adulthood?
Yeah, I definitely think a lot of stuff, stands out. I think one of the main things that, as I've gotten older, has been so crazy is the times where my dad was old in tennis, where he went on his run in 91, or, he played whatever, until he was in his early 40s. And now I'm 42, and I'm like, I'm not old. You know what I mean? Them thinking that he was old 3 years ago. I wasn't old 3 years ago. I'm not old now. You know? So the difference in an athlete's time versus a non-athlete's time is so different. I'm almost just starting to, kind of get into my prime as of early 40s, with maybe producing and, doing the podcast and other things. Most people in business. I was just think the weird part is when I go to him now, is like I'm asking him questions at 42 and he was almost starting to like wind down. Right. He like starts winding down where I'm almost like, okay, I want to do this. I want to get this going. Let's get this, and so it's so different the way he lived it versus the way, I'm living it. But, just dealing with all of that. I don't know. I remember traveling with him. I used to love traveling with him. On summers, I would, go and be gone for 3 months from my friends, and go be in this city and that city and on the senior tour or whatever he was doing. With team tennis, he played like 4 years in a row of team tennis that I got to go with him and brought the golf clubs everywhere. But yeah, just it was interesting. Now that I'm older, I understand it. But at the time, I'm 14 or 15 or whatever, and then you don't, in my mind, my dad's played tennis for 30 years. He's be done. He's been traveling and on the road and kind of taken away from us for a lot of time to do his job. So then you're thinking like he deserves the time off, but now you look back and you're like, that must have been difficult to be this age and everyone around you saying you're done, you should quit, you should retire, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So as I get older, I like every year where there's a sort of checkpoint with him, or like when I was 39 at the 91 Open, I thought a lot about that, going like, man, that was like the cherry on top of his career. And I haven't accomplished that much yet. Am I like behind? Should I feel bad? Should I feel good? So it's like, it shouldn't be using him as a comparison, because like, I feel like athletes live at a different rate of time than the rest of us.
Absolutely. But what I find so interesting, Brett, is now you and your dad are doing a podcast together, and you're talking about tennis, of course, because how could you not? But you're also talking about NFTs, which is how you and I kind of connected. And my mind just continues to get blown by how much tennis permeates everything I do in my life. And as I was telling you offline, even for my son who's no longer playing tennis, the tennis keeps infiltrating one way or another. And so can you talk a little bit about how your podcast came to be? What made you and your dad decide to kind of take this journey together, and what you're looking to accomplish through the podcast?
Yeah, we started it a little over 2 years ago. Kind of growing up, I would always hear my dad talk with some of his buddies like Eddie Dibbs, and David Schneider and some of his tennis friends. And they'd always be like, rah, 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 doing their rants and talking about the sports or the game or the gambling or whatever they're into. And I'd hear him say, we need our own radio show. And then, so as I got older, I always kept that in my mind, thinking that would be kind of a cool thing to do with him, and then go and talk to his buddies, go to talk to Dibbs and his friends that he grew up with, and get all the good stories and all of that stuff. So it was 2 years ago, we were just sitting around. I had downloaded just a free app on my phone, and I was like, hey, let's just preview the Australian Open finals. It's coming up in tomorrow or whatever it was, and let's talk for 15 minutes about it. And that was our first episode. And then we started kind of doing a couple. We did like 2 or 3 more the next month. And then we decided to try and get a guest. And we were lucky enough. Our first guest was Mike Tyson, of all people, which was kind of crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. His daughter plays tennis. So
I was getting ready to say, so he's a tennis dad too.
Yeah, he loves the tennis. So he was down in Indian Wells, and it was the day before they closed down everything with COVID.
So we had a little technical snafu there. Sorry about that, Brett. But you were talking about having Mike Tyson on as your first podcast guest.
Right. Yeah, we were lucky enough to get Mike Tyson on right as everything got shut down for the pandemic. So my favorite guest, I think, we've had a lot of great guests. I love them all, but so far he was so unique and interesting and different than I think what most people expect out of him. He's actually a really smart dude and is kind of deep and has a lot of interesting things to say. So that kind of kicked us off in getting guests. And then the fact that COVID happened, we didn't have much to do. So all of a sudden everything was locked down. I couldn't actually go see him because of the lockdown. So we kind of used it as an excuse to talk and, hang out for 45 minutes and chat what was going on. and keep up to date. Now those episodes are kind of cool because they're like little time capsules during the COVID. So you can kind of go back and see what was happening. And we just kept doing them. We started, just getting friends of, Jimmy's friends, our friends that we've known for years as guests. We've had Jeannie Buss on, the Lakers, president. We've had
Okay, wait. This is so weird. Jeannie and my husband went to Pali High together and were classmates.
Really?
And she hosted their 5-year high school reunion at Pick Fair.
Yeah.
So I've been there. I met her when I first moved to LA a million years ago. Yeah.
She's really cool. She's
my worlds keep colliding.
Well, her first gig when she started working for her dad out of college was running the strings, was the team tennis team at the old Great Western Forum. And then she put on these great exhibitions with Borg and Mac and my pops and like Agassi and Sampras later on at the Forum, and the Venus and Williams and Serena, when they were like 14, when they were like 12 or something. Like they were like the first exhibition ever Jeannie put on with them. So, we had her on, and then randomly my dad runs into Gary Player in Santa Barbara at a golf course. And he's like, "Hey, you want to come on?" He's like, "Sure." So then like the next day, Gary Player is in our dining room, talking to us about his career for 2 hours. And that was great. We've had Andy Roddick. We've had, Mike Lupica. We've had a lot of great people. But Pete Rose was awesome. And you said NFTs. So it just caught our eye because of the news. We had Darren Ravel on about a year ago, who's the sports business announcer, covers everything from, gambling to baseball, everything. And he kind of told us about it, and stupidly, I didn't dive in. Like, I just was like, "Oh, we're covering it. Like that. I know what I'm talking about now." And it was like, instead I should have done what I did like 6 months later and like dive in, because that was around the time Bored Ape like minted, I think. And if I had dove in then, there'd at least be a chance I would have grabbed one of those somewhere along the way. But ended up waiting a while, and then we in October, my girlfriend and I were like, "Look, this is a thing. Like, it's going to become a thing. Everyone that we think that's smart is starting to talk about it, like Gary Vee and all these different people. And so we're like, let's just bite the bullet and like try and learn it." And so we dove in and, we started researching, and we minted something right off the bat that was 0.3 Ethereum at mint. And we thought just by minting, like, this is how stupid we were. We're like, "Oh, we minted it. It says mint. We're trillionaires. Like, we've made it, like all we had to do was be a mint, And so we minted like 3 of them, which is over an ETH. And it was called Fat Ape Club. It was, let's just say it didn't hold the mint price for long. Yeah. And we learned our lesson quick. So we kind of went through all of the stuff. I've been rugged. I had that. I was scammed. I clicked the DM in the Discord early, stupidly, and lost a little chunk of money that way. But the last 2 or 3 months, I feel like we've kind of righted the ship and started investing in projects that we really believe in and like, whether it's for the art or for the community or for the utility. And I feel like my wallet now is a little bit better, a little bit cleaner.
Good. And one of the ones you invested in is my son's project, which is how you and I connected. So This was like totally random and bizarre, but I think you had tweeted something about and tagged his project, and I saw the tweet. And anyway, it's just like, again, as hard as you try to get away from tennis just keeps interjecting itself into everything in my life and my son's life and your life. It's just a funny way that life has of doing that to you. So.
Definitely. Your son's project. Well, it's even weirder the way I got into it, because I didn't know about it. And I'm in a project called Psychedelics Anonymous, which is an Australian project, which is a pretty good one. I really like it. It's my profile pic on Twitter. And I just happened to see that the owner of it,
Voltura, yeah.
Right, was in like a Spaces. And I was like, well, what's this? Like, he's in it. Like, I like everything he's talking about. Let me see what this is about. So I jumped into it, and it was the Roo Troop. So I jumped in and like listened, and they were talking, and I was like, I don't know much, but I like what he's doing. And this is another Australian project. And I was like, I'm going to mint it. And so I minted 3. And one of them happened to be super rare. I got very, very lucky. It's the rarest NFT I have of my whole collection. I got the number 4th ranked Root Troop with the Ethereum tail. I'm pretty psyched to have it, and not going to be selling anytime soon.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening who have no idea what we're talking about, I promise we'll get back to tennis. But if you don't know what NFTs are, and you don't know what Ethereum is, and you don't know anything about minting and holding and utility and all of that stuff, my son will be a guest on the podcast in the coming weeks, and he will explain it all to you. But for now, just suffice it to say that Brett and I connected through this other weird outlet that is now the way my son is making money. So just kind of very cool. And then I have another bizarro connection story that I shared with Brett offline, which is my mother-in-law, who is 93 years old. Her neighbor was a teacher at Harvard Westlake School in Los Angeles when Brett's dad, Jimmy, was a student there. And Jimmy was missing a lot of class because he was traveling to tennis tournaments. And his teacher pulled him aside one day and said, "Why are you missing so much school for tennis? You're never going to make a living doing this. You're going to have to get a job. You better focus on your education so that you can go to college and get a job and support a family someday in the future. This is ridiculous. You need to be in class." Well, lo and behold, that's Jimmy Connors. And yeah, I think he did okay with the tennis.
Right. He got lucky. He moved out here mid high school from Belleville to work with Pancho Segura and go to school out here. And that's what he told the teacher, is that he was playing tennis. So about half the time he was probably playing tennis. The other half the time he might have been at the beach with his buddy Spencer.
Yeah.
But that's a great story. I'm gonna have to tell him that and see what he says, see if he remembers it.
Yeah, it cracked me up. And I feel like ever since you and I have connected, all of these stories keep coming out that connect me to you some kind of a way. And it's been very interesting and kind of blown my mind a little bit. But anyway, so your work at the Tennis Channel now, I want to get back to that because, tennis is, I mean, I guess it's in your DNA. I don't know. How do you grow up the child of, a world champion? Somehow it's got to be part of who you are. And as much as you might fight it because, you chose golf over tennis for a lot of reasons, it sounds like, the tennis is still always there for you. And I think that's such an interesting storyline for parents to hear because, I talk to parents all the time and we talk a lot about burnout and what if my kid decides they don't want to play anymore and we've invested all this time and energy into the sport. And I keep saying, but even if they quit now, they've got the skills, it's ingrained in them. This will always be a part of their life. And you are a living testament to that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I kind of always had a love-hate relationship with it. I think in reality, I love tennis, the actual game itself. I love the game. I think I'm similar to my dad, where he loves the actual game, the competition, the sport. It might be all the other stuff around tennis that might turn us off a little bit. But yeah, you're right. I love the game. I love watching it. And it's weird because with tennis, I don't really play that much. I grew up playing, like you said, and the discipline always has stuck with me, that the one-on-one aspect of it, that, you can't take off a day because it's only going to be you out there tomorrow. So it's only going to hurt you if you don't do it, kind of thing. But yeah, I think I got away from it because of all the other stuff around it. But then now when I watch it and I work it, it's so second nature, different than golf. Whereas if I take time away from golf and then I go back to it, like I said, I might need to pick up some little things about, the equipment, this or whatever. But with tennis, I feel like I just know, it's just embedded in me from being around it so long, and being lucky enough to grow up around so many people who knew so much about it, and then when I'm young, it's just my buddies' coworkers, they're just hey, he's got to go play this thing. And these are the guys he's playing with.
Yeah.
And then you get older and you're like, that was Bjorn Borg, and that was, Guillermo Vilas, and that was, Jose Luis Clerc and John McEnroe, and like, all these great players that were just hanging out. And because I got to be like a fly on the wall, their guards were down more than they would be around other people.
Sure.
And just lucky enough to try and be a sponge and soak up as much of that as I could.
Do you think being around all of those people through your childhood helped shape your work ethic and your ability to set goals and work toward goals and, pace yourself that way?
I think so. I think when I was like younger, I struggled a little bit with that, because I felt like unless I attained such a high goal, it was a waste of time. Because I think I was always comparing myself to my dad, or even my mom. Like, she's not as well known as my dad, but she was a little bit, model in the 70s and stuff. So like both sides, like people already knew who they were before I would meet them, and that's a little, that kind of is disarming, because usually you have like an air of like mystery about yourself when you meet someone else who's a stranger, and then all of a sudden hey, I have this magazine with your mom, and I have this with your dad, and I know all these things about, past relationships of them or whatever it is. And so it's a little weird, but now when I cover it, I mean, I think it helps me a lot in, just realizing like we work crazy hours like to cover tennis because of the time difference. And at first I struggled with that, getting up at midnight or 1 or 2 in the morning, and I would complain and bitch and moan to my girlfriend and like, whatever it was. But then you realize it's like, hey, look, you're lucky enough to be the one going in to cover this sport. If you don't get there and with the 6 or 7 other people who you're in the control room with, it doesn't get put on air, So you're kind of like the caretakers of the sport a little bit. And so like once I started looking at it like that way, it made it a lot easier to get up at those hard hours and do some of those kind of things.
Do you think if you have children in the future, they'll play tennis?
Yeah, if they want to. I mean, if they can play whatever they want. Like, I'm not going to push them to play any certain thing. I mean, I give them a racket and see if they like it, and give them a golf club, see if they like it. But I would just be happy if they found something they like and they let their dad play with them.
Yeah, I love that answer. And it's funny because, I've watched and read interviews with athletes, multiple times. And that's pretty much the answer, right? It's that, yes, this sport gave a lot to me, and certainly I would expose my children to it. And, if they like it, great. If they don't, great. I mean,
Yeah.
I think finding your passion is one of those important things that professional athletes understand, and that's what they pass along to their child, is that desire for their children to find their passion, whatever that is.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a sport, it can be anything. But I think the problem with, if you force something, like if my dad had forced it on me, man, the payoff is so far away with all the pressure and all the stuff that's put on the kid or whoever it is, that like, yes, the payoff is amazing if they make it at 19 or 20 and you're like, see, I told you so,
Yeah.
But the kid has had to eat like 13 years of maybe like too much pushing, too aggressive. Maybe she wanted to do this, maybe she wanted more school life, or whatever it is. So it's a little dangerous when you push into one direction, just because sure, it can pay off in 15 years, but there might be a lot of negative things that come along the way that maybe don't even make it worth doing.
Yeah. Well, for me, the number one thing that I tell parents is the goal for the parent in this process is to get to the end of the journey with a great relationship with your kid. Nothing else matters but that, right? From the parent side.
Yeah.
So it seems that your dad has done an amazing job, and pardon me, but I don't know as much about your mom, so I'm focusing on your dad. So if your mom's listening to this, I know you had a big role in this too. Mama's played a huge role, but and please forgive me that, but
okay.
I think obviously your dad understood that throughout your childhood, because your relationship with him is pretty solid, so much so that you're producing a podcast together, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, he puts up with me bothering him every week to record. So it must be going okay. But yeah, I think it was a good mix. Like my dad having to be on the road so much, I was lucky enough that I got to go on the road with him for a good amount of his career. The last like 10 years of his career, I got to kind of tag along and do some of that stuff. And then my mom was so good at creating the home life and making it cozy and getting us up for school and taking us and making our lunches and doing all the regular mom things that moms everywhere out there do. So even though it was difficult in a lot of ways where you only have maybe one parent at a time, it made it good too, because I think that they were both so good at what they did as parents.
That's awesome to hear. I was going to ask you if you had any resentment toward your dad for being away so much, but it sounds like your parents found a way to balance each other and provide the kids what they needed.
I think when I was young, I guess you could say I probably had like, resentment, if you wanted to like classify it. But I think when you're young, you don't understand earning a living and like having to put food on the table and that it's like, you kind of get jaded with all the like, tennis. And it's like, I have to go, what do you have to go do? Play. You don't have to go work tennis. You have to go play tennis, which is a lot nicer than having to go work something,
Yeah.
So I think in my mind, I'm thinking, well, but it's still like anyone else whose dad or mom gets up and goes to work all day and they don't get to see their kids till, maybe just dinner time and before they go to bed if they're lucky. And so like, in a lot of ways it's unique, but in a lot of ways it's very normal, I think.
Did you have any inkling that your childhood was different from your friends?
I mean, I did. I think I would only notice it when I would bump up against them at school. So like things would happen in my life, like on the road it was just my life. So I didn't understand that I should maybe not talk about it, or I should talk about it in a different way. I would be so happy or proud to have done or met the person or the thing that I would want to share it with people I went to school with. And then you would realize like, oh, like you're the only one who gets that, or like you're one of the very few who gets to say this thing, and so like instead of a positive response, it would almost be like a smack in the face a little bit, just because they're like, oh, you meant blank, oh yeah, sure you did, you know what I mean, almost like use it to mock you and because in a way they're jealous, or they feel like that you're bragging, which I understand now. As you get older, you see why it doesn't play well. So I think in that way I knew that I was different. And then certain times you look around, you're like, oh, I'm on a private airplane with Boris Becker flying to an exhibition in like Berlin or something, you're like, I don't think a lot of people, let alone kids, are doing this sort of thing.
Right.
So there were those moments where you're like, yeah, I understand how lucky and how rare this is. And then as I got older, I started realizing like, oh, you realize like the coolest things you've done are probably behind you. As I got older and older, because the access to things goes away. Is like, dad, like, unless I become super rich and successful to maintain this crazy lifestyle that my father was able to have and give us, like, I realized, a lot of those things are in my past, so that was a little weird.
That's an interesting perspective that I hadn't thought about. And I'm glad you brought that up, Brett, because it is an interesting thought that, as a kid, you were exposed to all of these phenomenal experiences and people and travel and luxury. And then all of a sudden, you're an adult and have to figure out, okay, who am I now without my dad's name behind me, my dad's money behind me, or whatever? I mean, you've done okay for yourself. Yeah. And I think, having that drive to establish yourself independent of your dad, as we were talking about before, shines through with you. I mean, I think a lot of people might get sucked into that and just kind of curl up into the fetal position and say, my life will never be this good again, and freak out about it. But you found a way to kind of move past that and use all of the experiences you've had and the connections you've made over the years to forge your own path and your own career, which I think is really commendable.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, growing up and even now, I don't really like to say Jimmy Connor's son or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, I know I do a podcast with him, but that's, to me, like, the reason we do that is for fun.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm not looking, I mean, if it makes money somewhere down the road, great. But like, to me, it's like an excuse to hang out with my pops and like talk sports and gambling and, you know, NFTs. Now we're getting into that. And so, like, you know, I didn't like it. I still don't really like it, but I understand it. And I've always kind of shied more away from it, where I would
Mhm.
see maybe other people I grew up around, like, they would lean into it. And there was a time where I leaned into it when I was young, because you know, I would sometimes get the good reaction. You're like, oh, this is the thing to do. And then you get older, you're like, no, that's not the thing to do. You know, it's like you're robbing yourself of your own identity when you do
For
that a little
sure.
bit. So, you know, as I got older, I understood it, but I always wanted to try and make my own way or my name. And you know, I try to have my own style as a person, and what I'm into and what I like. And, you know, tennis happens to be one of those things because I grew up around it, and you know, I know a lot about it, but it's not the only thing in my life.
So if you were to give advice to the tennis parents out there, what's one thing you would tell them?
One thing I would tell them, I guess, start young, but like, start young as in like zero pressure. Just introduce the sport to them, whether it's the ball, the smaller racket, whatever you want to do. Introduce it as part of 10 other toys. You know, don't make it
Mhm.
this one thing. And then make it fun. Always keep it fun, and don't be a drill sergeant. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if you want to take your kid to a coach and then let them be more of the coach, that way there's that separation between family and coach, I think is important. Even though my dad had his mom as his coach,
Yeah.
there were things in that where I'm sure would have been better to have like a separation. You know, if you bring
Mhm.
everything home from the courts with you, it's, you know, it's like working together with someone a little bit. So I would just say, keep it fun. Let them be the one who tells you they want to go play more. Always leave them wanting more. So, like, don't let them play for 3 hours. Let them play for, you know, 45 minutes, and they want to play for 3 hours. That way they
Right.
come back the next day.
I love it.
So that's all I say. Make it fun and keep it in the kids' hand. Let them dictate it all.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So if people want to find your podcast, how can they listen to it?
Yeah, we're on Twitter. You can find us at ADV Connors. Instagram, we're Advantage Connors spelled out. Jimmy's Jimmy Connors. On Twitter, I'm Brett_Connors. We're signing with a new platform, Cloud 10, which is part of the iHeart Podcast Network. They're in the midst of switching over to a new platform themselves, a new hosting platform. So once they get set up, we're going to move over. But still, for right now, our Gary Vee episode is up, which is our first of the year. And I'll be releasing our second episode later this evening.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And we'll have links to all that in the show notes on parentingaces.com. So if you are having trouble locating, just go to Parenting Aces and click on the links in the show notes. Brett, it's been a pleasure meeting you. And now that we're connected, I'm hoping that I'll start seeing you around, and now I know what you look like, and, you know, we can say hello live and in person. And yeah, I appreciate you taking time.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me, and look forward to seeing you and Rudy Roo.
Rudy Roo. To my audience, thank you so much for tuning in. I promise you'll get the inside jokes once Morgan's my guest on the podcast. We will catch you next time on Parenting Aces.